Oh, an unexpected snow day. Who would have ever guessed? So today I just want to go over the test with you. That's really all I want to get accomplished. We're going to start new and fresh on kind of the buildup of the Nazi Party, how they were running their, I guess you could say, leadership in Germany during the time of the start of World War II, and kind of building up to Germany's aggression once again. Back at it. Okay, so moving on here. Let's go over this test. All right, so the test, everybody did pretty well. I just wanted to make sure I go over this so everybody's on the same page, and make sure that we have that done. So the Kellogg-Briand Act, 1928 international agreement in which signatory states promise not to use war to resolve disputes or conflicts of whatever nature, whatever origin they may be, which may arise among them. The Big Four. So met in Paris to negotiate the treaty. Lloyd George of Britain, Vittorio Emanuele Orlando of Italy, Clemenceau of France, and Wilson of the U.S. All right, so Gustav Stresemann, he was a German statesman who served as chancellor in 1923 for 102 days, and a foreign minister from 1923 to 1929 during the Weimar Republic. Fascism. Okay, fascism is a form of far-right authoritarian characterized by dictatorial power, forcible suppression of opposition, and strong regimentation of society. League of Nations. Let me find this one here for. An international diplomatic group developed after World War I as a way to resolve disputes between countries before they erupted into open warfare. Paul von Hindenburg. He was let me find it now, German general and statesman who led the Imperial German Army during World War I and later became president of Germany from 1925 until his death in 1934. Collectivization. Policy adopted by the Soviet government pursued most intensively between 1929 and 1933 to transform traditional agriculture in the Soviet Union. Communism. A philosophical, social, political, and economic ideology and movement that is the far left with total government control. All right, leaders. Mussolini, Benito Mussolini, Italian politician and journalist who was a leader of the National Fascist Party. Joseph Stalin, Soviet politician who led the Soviet Union from the mid-1920s to 1953 as a general secretary of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union and premier of the Soviet Union. Hirohito, 124th Emperor of Japan. Hideki Tojo, Japanese politician and general of the Imperial Japanese Army who served as Prime Minister of Japan and President of the Imperial Rule. Adolf Hitler, German politician and leader of the Nazi Party who rose to power as the Chancellor of Germany in 1933 and as Führer in 1934. All right, here we go. Multiple choice. Idea in 1924 that successfully resolved the issue of World War I reparations that Germany had to pay off. The Dawes Plan. Lasted for a short period of time. I won't say it successfully did it, but it really benefited for a short period of time. This treaty was established to put an end to World War I and is considered one of the causes to World War II. Treaty of Versailles. Many people fear this type of government would spread and take over governments throughout the world. Communism. This type of government emerged at the end of World War I, which expresses strong nationalism and is controlled by a totalitarian dictator. Fascism. What was Benito Mussolini's nickname? Il Duce. Parliamentary wing of the National Fascist Party and name of the followers of Mussolini in Italy, the Black Shirts. Who was leader of the Soviet Union before Joseph Stalin? Lenin. What kind of government did the Soviet Union have? Communistic. How did Stalin try to enforce industrialization in the Soviet Union during the late 1920s? 5-year plans. This was a system of labor camps maintained in the Soviet Union from 1930 to 55 in which many people died. Gulag. Name of the 124th Emperor of Japan during World War II. Hirohito. Name a nationalistic military general who made most of the decisions in Japan during World War II. Hideki Tojo. What type of government did Japan have during World War II? This was a totalitarian militaristic government. Hitler overthrew this government in Germany in 1933, the Weimar Republic. Under Hitler's rule, what kind of government did Germany have? Totalitarian fascist. This party within Germany prompted a strong sense of German nationalism, the Nazi Party. Book that Adolf Hitler wrote while he was in jail and promoted the Aryan culture and talk about issues that caused the depression in Germany after World War I, Mein Kampf. This term means living space in Germany, Lebensraum. We'll talk about this more next chapter. This term means higher class in Germany, Volk. This term means lower class and less desirable people, the Leute. What did Hitler name himself once he gained control of Germany in 1934? Der Führer. All right, so short answer. Describe how the Treaty of Versailles was a cause of World War II. What did this treaty place on Germany? Describe who the Big Four are and their aims of treaty established after World War I. So Big Four real quick. Lloyd George of Great Britain, Clemenceau of France, Orlando of Italy, and Woodrow Wilson of the United States. Treaty of Versailles was designed to try to create peace, this armistice, right, between all countries. And many of the players, especially France and Great Britain, wanted to make sure that Germany could never rise to a world power ever again because they're a threatening military. So, real quick, some of the regulations set on them. Number one, sole blame, the war guilt clause. 2, military restrictions. They couldn't have a navy either. 3, loss of borderlands, especially these industrial areas right across the Rhine, like right along the Rhine, and on the eastern side of Germany, where modern-day Poland is. Another one was territorial losses. Okay, so they lost their territories, their resources. So if they have no raw materials, resources, if they have no industrialization, how are they going to rebuild? They can't. Finally, they have to pay for all the war debt, really, and help France and Great Britain rebuild after World War I. So again, no industries, no factories, no raw materials or resources, no military, no nationalism. So this was really trying to stick it to Germany, make sure that they never become a dominant power again. That's what kind of led to World War II, this extreme hatred. Describe how many of the dictators we discussed in class ruled their country. What were some commonalities amongst them all in their leadership? How could these countries all rise as military imperialistic powers when it was established that no countries could at the end of World War I? All right, so we all know with Mussolini coming into power with his fascist ideas, his ideology, bringing back this nationalism that Italy once had. He led a march on Rome, and he really looked towards that Roman Empire and a lot of their nationalistic ideals, and showed the people what Rome once was. And he wanted to try to bring Italy back to that world power. And the way he's going to do that is going to combat against unemployment during the depression that was occurring right at the end of World War I, build up the military, and expand his power into parts of Africa, which we talked a little bit about, Ethiopia. And the reason he could do that was because of the control of the media, propaganda, and really he was trying to infuse this idea and this nationalist idea with his black shirts, right? And anybody that opposed him was pushed out, exiled, or even killed. And he targeted the younger generation, so education, academics, public schools, you name it. And he could get away with this because the League of the Nations was weak. The League of Nations didn't have the ability to combat against this aggressive power because Great Britain and France kind of agreed that they wouldn't increase their military, that they would kind of focus on rebuilding. And America wasn't even involved. Same thing happened with Germany. So Hitler did a lot of the same things. He pushed for nationalism back in Germany, promised a strong military, promised to bring Germany out of this depression, by combating against unemployment, building up the military, targeting the youth, which we'll talk a little bit more about next chapter, focusing on public education to make sure that there's only one spoken ideology, really just looking to expand Germany's military power. And he could do this, again, because the League of Nations was so weak. France, Great Britain, even the United States didn't have a military, and the United States wasn't even involved, like I mentioned before. And to control the media, use of the secret police, use of authoritative military control to make sure that no one really could combat against them. All right, Soviet Union is a little different, but still similar. So the Soviet Union, collectivization. So Stalin knew that Russia, Soviet Union, was far behind when it came to industrialization, modernization, and military growth and power. They had the manpower, they had the resources, they just needed to utilize it. So Stalin enforced these 5-year plans to try to pump prime, kickstart industrialization in the Soviet Union. And collectivization will be used on these private lands to try to have government control of it, to make sure all the resources, raw materials, whether it's oil, gas, whether it is crops, food supply, is directed right towards the military, right towards the government. And it didn't end after 5 years, right? It continued on more and more and longer. I'd say probably for 30 years, Soviet Union was doing this to try to rise as this world power. And it was successful, but it came to a big cost, where thousands of people, millions of people were even killed for these labor camps called gulags. And anybody that opposed his power was killed, exiled, or forced into these labor camps. And in Russia especially, this is an area where the environment isn't too friendly, especially with weather and cold environments. All right, so that's the Soviet Union. Next one's Japan. So Japan, we discussed, went over about how they closed themselves off for 400 years since the age of exploration in the 1400s, all the way up until the 1800s. They could do that because they're an island. They didn't like the European culture that could be pressed into their country. They saw what was going on in Vietnam, well, modern-day Vietnam. Saw what was going on in the Korean Peninsula, China, where a lot of these European countries were really forcing these people to work as slaves in their own country. And they didn't want the European religion enforced within their society and culture. And this kind of pushed for, when the United States was imperializing areas, especially out in the Pacific and moving out to these Asian markets. We talked about gunboat diplomacy and how Matthew Perry came over with these huge iron battleships, modern-day battleships, and really forced Japan to open up their borders. It was like a July 4th celebration. They're only shooting off fireworks, but realistically they're shooting artillery onto Tokyo. And it was an accident, our bad. No, the United States just wanted to try to expand their power. So then Germany saw these gunboats, they saw these naval vessels, and they wanted to apply that to their culture. They knew if they didn't modernize, if they didn't advance, they would fall behind. And they shared an alliance with the United States for about 50, 60 years until the buildup of World War II. So ever since then, since the mid-1800s, Japan has been industrializing, militarizing, to a point where their navy was unmatched by everybody in the world. And they had to imperialize places in Korea, Siberian Peninsula, with that Russo-Japanese war that they defeated Russia in the early 1900s. China, expanding down into modern-day Vietnam. Okay, eventually the Philippines, which will really push the United States against Japan. And they had to do this because they're an island. They restricted their resources. But anyway, the commonality amongst all these leaderships is that they pushed for strong nationalism, the buildup of the military. And no one could stop them because the League of Nations, this international corporation, this international organization, really wasn't suited to stop this expansion, to stop this militaristic ideals of all these countries. Great Britain, France, the United States wasn't even involved. They weren't focused on building up their military. They didn't think another war would happen. So that allowed them to become stronger. And a common thread, targeting media, using the media as their greatest weapon, which we discussed that, yeah, military is probably your greatest asset of becoming a strong country. But if you want to try to take full control of people and individuals, media is your best source of I guess you could say it's asset. So targeting youth, targeting academics, only having one viewpoint presented to people, and they gave everything what people wanted. So jobs, a prosperous lifestyle, expansion, domination. All right, that's all I have for the lesson for today. Again, you have your results sent back from the form, and then I just now have the video going over it.